Hello again. My name is Leo Russ. I'm a founder of SoftwareID.net, a company that specializes in custom software development, web development, and education for small businesses and individuals in northern Idaho. So this is the second presentation tutorial in the Computers for Rookies series. In the first session, we covered basic concepts of operating systems and file management. Those were prerequisites required to start actual web development, actual programming. So this session will do exactly that. So let's get started. Okay, in the first session, we discussed file system, file naming, and file extensions, so associations with applications. So let's utilize some of the skills we acquired last time and create our working directory. And here's, let's call it my web project. So we talked about path and the importance of appropriate casing, so it be consistent across the board. And we also talked about path being related to the top level. In this case, it's this PC with the drives under and then structures inside the drives. From the web perspective, we need to use a different type of path. So this is what we used before. It's called absolute path. It's absolute to the top level on your box. However, once your site is deployed to the remote server where it is available to the world, it will not have drive F, it will not have this PC, it will only have a root of your hosting domain. So in this case, so let's pretend that this is my web project. So all references are related to this level. This is called relative path. So if we are calling some application from this location, then relative path needs to specify location based on this. So we need to probably look here. So the path has a couple, literally a couple ways to specify hierarchy. So for example, so let's so this is contents of the root directory on drive C. So if we change that to data, and you can do data small letters or capital, it doesn't matter, uppercase, lowercase, but it's just a good habit to develop. Use correct casing. If I do directory command, it lists the directory contents of the data directory folder. However, I can do this. That's not what I meant. I meant this. Here we go. Apparently Windows does not like slash everywhere. So in this case, I didn't like it. So, but still, in references, both front, forward, and back backslash, they work identically. So what I did now, if you look at this line here, I executed the directory command, and all that command does, it lists contents of the directory. But it listed contents not of the directory I am currently in, which is data, but the parent directory, which is root. It's the directory of C. So two dots signify a parent directory. That's pretty simple. One dot signifies current directory. And when you are creating a relative path, it has to be done using this annotation. So we'll see this mechanism in practice, but in the meantime, if I have a folder called images, so I intend to store all icons, all photographs, everything related to images used on the site within this directory. If I have a uh, folder, uh, for example, JS, where I intend to store JavaScript files. So in this case, if I were to use reference from this level, from my root level, the project root level, my web project, I use this path. I can do this, and that signifies JavaScript directory. Or I can do this, and that signifies images. This dot is technically not necessary, it's just for clarity, it's good business practice. So let's say, for example, I need to um, make a reference from inside JavaScript to the file inside the images folder. I need to take one step up to the same level as images and then images. So if I am inside JavaScript directory, the JavaScript folder, I use this parent annotation, and then, so I step one, if I'm here, I take one step up and then back down into images, because images is at the same level as JavaScript. So this is a simple, straightforward concept. It may initially cause some confusion, but what's nice about HTML, especially when you are new to programming, you don't need to compile anything. It's very simple. You make changes, you refresh your browser window, and see the results. If, for example, an image is missing, so you did not specify the path correctly, then the dedicated icon is displayed showing that the image was not found. So pretty soon you'll get a grasp on that. So next I'd like to say a couple of words about general programming practices. First of all, whatever you write, whatever you create, is supposed to be minimally sufficient. So what this means is you do not over-engineer. You do not use tools or frameworks that are not required in order to achieve your goal. Your goal is to have your web page created, accessible, and contain information that is easy to understand, and the user does not get bored. That's all. So we'll try to stick to this principle. This principle, by the way, is perfectly applicable in real in everyday life. The next one is principle of least privilege. Again, this principle is even more applicable to everyday life than minimally sufficient. With minimally sufficient, the simple example is if you have a family of 4, you don't need a bus that can carry 50 people. And some people do that, but it's not rational. In software engineering, you have to be rational. Otherwise, you get lost in details that are not necessary and serve no purpose whatsoever. Now, principle of least privilege can be described as follows. Every object needs to be aware of only those items that it requires to perform its action. So anything that's outside of the interest of an object or a file or a program or an application, it should not be there. Because adding stuff that is not necessary leads to errors, to bugs, and the application becomes unmanageable. To demonstrate it in a real life example, for example, let's say I'm sure you noticed that in some stores cashiers ask for your phone number. It's amazing how many people, without asking any questions, just give their phone number. So using this principle, you should ask yourself, okay, does the cashier need to know your phone number in order to take cash and give you a receipt? The answer is no. Therefore, you do not provide your phone number, regardless of whether it's secret or not. It's just not relevant. It's not related to the transaction at hand. So I personally follow this principle always. And unintended consequences of not following this principle are, of course, obvious. Your phone number gets sold to questionable marketing entities. Those questionable marketing entities sell it somewhere else, and your number ends up in a New Delhi basement in India, and you start getting credit card reduction phone calls. So your phone number is your business, you're paying for it, and it's not related to your transaction, therefore you don't provide it, period. So the next topic is browsers. There are 3 or 4 major browsers available in the market. Well, rumors are that Google Chrome is the most popular, followed by Internet Explorer, and finally Safari and or Firefox. I personally don't like any of them. They all are flawed, this way or the other. But I still prefer Firefox. It has bugs, it doesn't handle certain things very well. Some sites are not only not optimized for Firefox, but certain functions don't even work there. This is not right. When you're writing your code, you need to make sure that it works among all browsers. Unfortunately, we cannot have different versions of the same browser installed on the same machine. So we have to deal with a specific version. Google Chrome is pretty fast. It's more or less universally compatible. What I don't like about it, when you look into your task manager, you may see 5, 6, 7, or 10 instances of Google Chrome processes running at the same time. If you ask me what are they doing, I don't know. Nobody knows. Google knows. I know one thing for a fact, nothing good. So it's very intrusive. Microsoft Explorer has its own disadvantages. It's pretty slow. It's has large footstep, and also many technologies don't work on Microsoft Explorer because since Microsoft considers itself a #1 player in the game, they don't believe they need to conform to international development standards. So in many cases, when you write a code and you want that code to work on Internet Explorer, you need to specifically check if the browser for this session is Explorer, and if so, run different code. It's not a fun proposition. And the last but not least preliminary topic, privacy and security. It's a huge area, so I won't get much into details. Just say that you are never anonymous or secure online. So we do use firewalls and antivirus software and the spyware software, but you're still never anonymous. You send the request, so there are 2 objects that are transferred between your workstation, your client, and the server. Request and response. Both of them go through at least one place where they are identifiable and associated with you personally, your internet service provider. So there is no such thing as an anonymous presence online. So keep that in mind. Everything you do, every character you type, as long as you connect the network, it's stored somewhere and stored forever. There is no legal system that controls that. You cannot go to court to say, I want Google to remove my information. It's public information. As soon as you provide it, it's not yours anymore. So I suggest keeping that in mind. People forget it and don't pay attention. They go and F-book and share with the world what they have for breakfast and what conspired out of that. It's their personal business, but it stays there forever. If 20 years from now you want to buy insurance and the insurance company gets access to your profile and find out that you ate something that they don't personally like 20 years ago, they may deny insurance. They don't even have to explain why. So something that I never forget, and I strongly recommend that you never forget either. So back to business. Last time we discussed file associations. We talked about the fact that all files with extensions, with known extensions, are associated with some kind of a program that is capable of handling that file type. The files that are used in the web space are most common are have extension HTML. So I create a text file, rename it, and call it index.html. So it tells me that I changed the extension from TXT to HTML, therefore it may not work correctly. In this case, it does work correctly, and that's exactly what we intended to do. So we say yes. Now, this icon changed from Notepad++ that is associated with TXT files to Google Chrome, that for some reason, that's one of the reasons I am not particularly proud of Google Chrome. This association has changed because I have it set by default to Mozilla Firefox. So we covered this last time, but it never hurts to repeat. So I can just click Firefox and it will open in Firefox. However, it will happen only once. If I want to change this, persist this behavior, then I do open with, find my application here, and then click this checkbox. From now on, this file opens in Firefox. This is Firefox. It has a little different interface, so it will help. We should see it. Hi, Firefox. Okay, so it's index.html is a traditional way, traditional entrance point to your website. It's located in the root folder of your site. So in our case, it's my web project. So if when your site is deployed and somebody types your domain name, and that domain name will replace my web project, this file is executed by default. So you don't need to specify. You go somewhere, if there is an index.html file, that file opens automatically. So this is an entry point to your site. It's not the only extension available. There's the older standard HTML that still works. There are JSP files and many others. But we will stick to HTML because it's basic, it's simple, it's understandable, requires no real programming in the meantime. So let's stick to that. So what you do, you need to edit that HTML file. Since it's associated with Firefox, if you click this file twice, it opens in Firefox. However, we want to open it in the text editor, in this case Notepad++. So again, we'll utilize our previously acquired knowledge, and we open it in Notepad only once. So we won't persist this behavior. The file is open here. So we don't want that file. So next, this file is here. The file is empty. So your page is empty. So every time we make a change to this file, all we need to do, save the file and reload this page so that the changes take effect. Um, this button reloads the page, or F5 shortcut. It's a single key, not F and 5, but F5, the one that is on top, in the row on top of your keyboard. So F5 refreshes it. Um, so now we have the same file opened in two applications, one for editing, one for rendering. So HTML is a language. It's not a programming language. It doesn't have per se logical mechanism, but uh, it's translated into as a hypertext markup language. So it's a standardized system for tagging text files. Your browser is designed to handle standard tags that you put in the HTML file. So this tag means it's a bold text, this tag means it's a certain color of the background, everything else. So that's all it does, is just rendering. There is no business logic there. So the HTML is a scripting language, and there are two types of languages, scripting versus interpreted. And purists still fight over exact definition. From my perspective, the files that are humanly readable are scripts. So some say that if it's an application, it's an interpreted language. If it's not an application like HTML, then it's a script. Well, not quite true, because there are languages used to write applications that still are scripts, because the contents of the file can be read by a human being. So to demonstrate this concept, let's say we'll go to whatever. No. No, it's not here. Nothing is here. So let's find some binary file so we could. Yep, this is a binary file, for example. So if we open this file in Notepad++, and the text editor is garbage. It's a binary file, it's an application. So based on my understanding, the difference is if the code can be read, interpreted, and manually edited by a human being, it's a script. If it cannot, it's an application. It's I'm sorry. It's an interpreted language. So scripts are not compiled when you create the code. They are compiled at runtime. And they are compiled for each operating system. There is a different compilation process. You don't know what it is, and you don't care. By the way, this is yet another general concept of software engineering. You don't ask too many questions. You don't care where electricity comes from. You plug your TV in and it works. All you care about that there's 110 volts and 60 hertz coming out of your outlet. It's the same thing. You are using somebody else's plugin, somebody else's code, somebody else's applications. They are building blocks of your application. So if you try to understand everything that's going on behind the scenes, life is too short. It's unrealistic. The main concept to understand is scripts are interpreted by the operating system at runtime. So you create an HTML file, you put it in Windows version of Firefox or Explorer knows how to handle that file, how to interpret, how to compile it at runtime when you click on that file. If you put the very same file, no changes, you put that file on Mac, Mac version browser knows how to deal with that. You put it on Linux, then Linux version knows. So it's the same file, and that pertains to all scripts. JavaScript is the exact same thing. It's humanly readable, manually editable code that does not change between platforms. So the application that handles it needs to know how to process it. It's none of your concern. So that's I think that's the um, definition of script. On the other hand, files like this, like binary, they are compiled for a specific operating system. Because computer doesn't know difference between A and Z. Computer operates with zeros and ones. So everything is converted into binary code, zeros and ones. So this file is already machine code. Doesn't mean that you can see just zeros and ones. There are special characters that are interpreted by the operating systems, but ultimately it's zeros and ones. So you cannot run this file on Mac. It will not run. It will crash. The operating system will complain and refuse to open it. So this is interpreted language, probably C++. There are languages that combine the best of both worlds, like Java. You write your code in a text editor, and then that code gets precompiled and it's created like halfway. So it's created a class file, and that class file already is interpreted by a specific operating system at runtime. So the advantages of scripts are they're easy to create, they're easy to edit, and they are platform independent. The same script you can run on any operating system. But scripts are slower because they're basically compiled every time you execute them. The files compiled for this specific operating system, they're closer to machine code, and they are much faster for the computer to process. These days, computers are fast enough and are capable of way more than we normally use them for. So this is not the issue. That's why hugely popular scripting frameworks based on JavaScript and PHP is very popular. Perl is less popular these days, but Python, all those scripting languages are getting second birth. Okay, so now let's start actual. So let's say we type in our HTML file, which basically is a text file. So let's type a line. Traditionally, every time a person writes the first code in any language, it has only one function. It displays hello world on the screen. So let's see how, now this is not a correct or normalized HTML file. So let's see how Firefox handles it. Okay, so how Firefox is intelligent enough to interpret this as an HTML document, even though it's not. So it's just forgiving. It just tells you, okay, you didn't do a very good thing, but I let it fly for now. So let me show you the properly formatted HTML file. So the HTML file is supposed to have a doctype tag, and by no means this is a full version of that tag. We'll look at the full version later, but this is minimally sufficient for now. So it should have HTML tag, and the tags are supposed to be open and closed. Oops. So we have an HTML tag open, HTML tag closed. We have head tag open, head tag closed. Title tag open, title tag closed. Now we need a body tag open and body tag closed. All your contents belong in the body between these two tags. The head section is dedicated to imports, references to external files you use, meta tags. Uh, you can have JavaScript code, JavaScript functions within the head section. So it's a service. Whatever happens inside the head does not get displayed. So let's do our first actual HTML program in traditional way. So what we did, we used two tags, and I already mentioned that, but I'll reemphasize that HTML handles standard tags only. The browser needs to know what this tag means or this tag means. So we cannot invent our own tags. There are languages where you can, like XML. Those are flexible, extensible languages. Here you cannot. If you use a tag that browser is not familiar with, it's going to be displayed just as text. So let's see what happens now. We do refresh, push F5. Here we go. So H1 means header 1, the largest possible header. We can do, just for demonstration purposes, we do H2. Save the file. Every time you need to save the file. And then here's your second line. So H not only creates a new line, but also formats the text in a specific way. So the font size, and it's bold. So this is your first HTML program. Congratulations, it got rendered and the browser recognized it. So now there are tools available online that it's not too smart not to use. So there are online validators, HTML validators. There are a lot of them. So we can use whatever comes up first. No, don't like that. Some of them are can only be used as. Okay, we have an option to update the file, so we can just browse to this file and do this and select this file. Now do check. Okay, the character encoding was not declared. Right. So this first tag, doctype HTML, is incomplete. By the way, some validators don't complain about this, others do. So what we can do here, and of course I don't remember, and I'm sure you don't remember, what the exact, I know what information should be contained there, but the exact syntaxes we don't know. So if we do HTML file header, this is very simple. Here is the full declaration of doctype. So here's what it means. It means that we are using HTML version 401. Surprisingly, our language is English. We are using schema of this type, strict schema. Schema is an external file, again, scripting file, that defines the file structure. It determines what elements must be present, if there is any limit to number of specific elements, and so forth. So it's a document that says this file must have this, cannot have that, and if it has this, it has to be in a certain order. So it defines the structure of the file. Strict is strict. There are other options like uh, loose. There's option frame. So they are for different purposes. So let's use strict so we don't get tempted to uh, invent something that we should not be inventing. So let's save that file, make sure it runs. It runs, and now we can again use this as validator. Okay. Now, specific transition errors are named. The character encoding was not declared. Okay. So one other piece is missing, and this is very strict. That's because this is a strict schema. If we used loose, which we may try to do, it probably will not complain, because it gives us some flexibility. Let's make sure it runs. It runs, and let's validate it again. And check. Character encoding still. So then character encoding is technically mandatory, regardless of schema. So we can see what it looks like. I think it should probably be something like that. Let's see if it still complains. If it does, then nope, nope, it doesn't want that. Okay, so let's see. Um, it should be somewhere here. Yes, this site handles. Okay, all right. Oops, yeah, forgot to remove this. That's it. So what it was looking for is a meta tag. There are many different meta tags that can be put inside the head. Um, so normally it does not affect performance, but we want to make sure that it confirms the standard. So now this file is in compliance. So nobody can blame us for writing bad code. So you probably noticed the tab tab name here, page title, here where it comes from. So let's make sure that it's coming from here. Let's change it, reload it, and sure enough, it's coming from there. Okay, now we can apply some editing. So we can change appearance of our web page. Because of course this is not really functional. It doesn't look good. It has no information, and if we try to enter information here, it's not going to be easily comprehensible. So let's see what kind of formatting we can add here. So for example, we want to change the background color. So there is a special attribute. Now the difference between the tag name and the attribute specifies just a feature of a tag. So it's an additional information pertaining to that tag. Because in essence, HTML file is an XML file, but it's not flexible, so the all tags are predefined, but the general construct of the file, like tags, open, close, siblings, parents, children, all this is XML structure. So if we do this now, it should change the background color. So isn't that nice? Now we can do we can change color. What we did here is a very old-fashioned. It still works, but if you write a code like that in the corporate settings, you're gonna get fired on the spot. This is very old-fashioned way of defining tag attributes. So this is how it's done these days. That's considered good business practices. It's done through styling. This is called inline style. So this style is defined inside the HTML document, so it's inline. So if we refresh this page, we get blue. So the next step, all code has to be well organized. Now imagine you have 100 pages in your site, which is perfectly reasonable, and you decide to change your background color. You need to go through every single page and change blue to gray or gray to blue. It's a hideous task, and you inevitably miss one or more. So the look and feel of your site will not be even. So it has to be exact same. It's very important to maintain that general feeling of your layout. So there is an option that is normally used. It's called CSS. This is something that every single commercial project uses, and I strongly encourage you to use that as well, to make sure that you only make changes in one place, and then these changes get propagated throughout your domain. So what we do, let's create a new folder and call it CSS. So it makes sense to separate types of files. So we have all cascading style sheets where your presentation specifics reside. You have images where your images are, obviously, and JS where your JavaScript files are. This structure is by no means mandatory, but it's a good programming business practice. So let's in CSS and create a new file, which is ultimately text file. That's why we choose this, but we change the extension to CSS. So let's call it main.css. So again, we get a warning that you change the type. So when I do this, change the icon. So now this icon Let's see what is default for this file. Notepad is default for this file. Okay, we don't want that. We want that to be Notepad++ as well. So we choose another app and we use Notepad++. Okay, so here's our CSS file. So inside that file, we create a definition of our style. So let's first create a link. This is done inside the head section. So we create link in that and call it this file as same name. Again, make sure we use the same case. But in our example, the HTML file where CSS file is referenced from is inside CSS directory. So we need to make sure that we have correct path. So what we do, so this is relative path. CSS folder is at the same level as index, so we don't have to specify, we don't have to go up or down or anywhere sideways. We just specify CSS as a directory. So next we can move this style. It's not here anymore, and we move it to main CSS. So here's what it looks like. So we specify the element this style applies to. This is syntaxes. Oops, we do need semicolon, but we don't need anything else. So in this case, what I expect, oops, background color, alright. Yes. So in this case, I expect the color to be blue, just like when it was specified in the HTML file. So let's get back to our browser, refresh the page, and it's still blue. Good. So now, within your domain, every file that has this link, this reference to this CSS file, every single one will have body specified here. So if you change this to red, every single body element on all pages within your domain that have this link change color. This is beautiful concept and it should be used, this and only this. Very few exceptions when you have a unique case, like in one place you need to make a change. Usually you have uniform elements. Let's say you have main text area on every page. As contents may differ, but the style should be the same. In that case, it has to be specified in CSS file. However, if you have a unique case, one occasion when you want to change something in one place, then you may consider doing it in line. But generally, it's not a good practice. So if we, okay, so that part works. So next, we may want to explore colors. Like I mentioned before, computer knows no difference between A and Z, and especially does not know what red means. So in the background, in case of a script like HTML, when the file is compiled in real time on the fly, then this red set of characters, it's called string, is interpreted the way we expect it to be interpreted. How it's done, we don't know or we don't care. However, we want to understand colors web design a little better. So we can do this. So I expect to see green background. Now let's talk about it. So computers operate and understand binary code, zeros and ones. Everything in software engineering is a power of 2. So these 6 characters are actually 3 strings. They represent RGB model, which stands for red, green, and blue, 3 main colors. Each color can have different, can have a certain level of shade, certain intensity. So green has maximum intensity because this, so in our decimal system that we use on a daily basis, most of us, we have 10 meaningful characters from 0 to 9, 10 total values. This is hexadecimal or hex. So it has 16 values. Each one of these Fs has 16 values, 0 through 9 and A through F. And 16 is 2 power 4. Two of them, just like 100 or 99 in our case, 99 has 100 possible values, which is 10 square. So in this case we have 16 square because we have two variables with 16 levels each. So 16 power 2 is 256. So each one of these colors has 256 possible shades. Altogether, when they're combined all together, they have 256 power 3. That's total number of colors possible to display using this RGB scheme. Now this represents so that's almost, I think, 17 million colors. That's what can possibly be displayed using RGB schema. I believe it's like 16.77 something. Now, it's not the only one. The other widely used on the web schema is GIF. It's graphic interchange format. This one has same 3 colors, but each one has only 8 shades. So 8 times 8 times 8 is 256. So advantages of using this schema are it's a very small file size. It's still not black and white, it's still not gray, it's color, but very small size. This format is very useful for icons or buttons, so graphics that where details are not important. If you want to display a photograph, then use RGB schema. The files, RGB files are compressed format files are JPEG, and now new one, relatively new PNG. So those are compressed, so they are relatively small, but they have full 16.77 million colors. So this is for icons and buttons. This is for details, for detailed graphics, photographs. Now, when you're creating this file, you have an option to um, set compression, so set quality. So that you need to experiment with. So for example, you use Photoshop and you're converting a native PSD. We can look at that later, but just general idea. You're converting uh, a Photoshop file into JPEG. You are presented with an option: set compression ratio up to 12. 12 is the best quality and the largest file size. So that's something that you need to look for in your particular application. It makes difference. You want to display fine detail, like let's say you sell jewelry and you want to show a beautiful diamond ring, you better use higher quality image. Well, that's pretty obvious. So let's erase this. Um, so all this information, the information that I'm presenting today, and information that that I presented previously, all this is widely available. You go online, you type web color schema, and you get thousands and thousands and thousands of sites that explain this. Maybe they explain it better than I do here. So what I'm trying to achieve, so you need to, first you need to know what you want. Second, you need to know where to find it. And finally, you need to know how to interpret this. Between 1 and 2, it'd be nice to insert, you need to know what's available. So now you know that there are different color schemes for different purposes used for web development. So now you can go online and do web colors, and you'll get thousands and thousands of hits with color tables and numeric conversion table that converts from numeric into text like red, green, blue, whatever. Today you can specify color not as just as basic color, green, yellow, blue, purple, but there are many options: light gray, dark gray, and many others. However, the exact control you can get only using this numeric value. There are even resources online that where you can enter your numeric value, and it shows you what it looks like, what color it actually represents. So you need to experiment. Say, I like this color, I don't like that. So there's some artistic side to this. So now let's create a layout element. So right now everything is just randomly dumped into the body. So it's all by default is top level, top left corner. So let's do this. So this is division tag, and it gives you more control over your screen real estate. Division, you can have a separate file for division, so let's try this, and so let's do this. Let's specify ID, because you need to reference this somehow. So there are two ways to specify style. So we do ID, my division 1. Oops, why jumped on me. You may also want to specify, if you use ID, then the style is applied to this element only. You can use class attribute, and it doesn't have to be named the same. Then every element that has this class attribute specified will apply the same style. So let's do this here. Oops, let's see what the ID is. My division ID. Oh, my division 1. Okay, so we do this. and you specify background color. Let's do this. Now, since this is RGB, this is red, this is green, this is blue. Levels of red and blue are 0. They don't exist. They are not present. However, green is 100% 256. I'm sorry, 255, because we have 256 levels between 0 and 255. So we specify this. Now, if we have all 6 zeros, it's black. If we have all 6 Fs, it's white. So it's pretty straightforward and simple. So let's see if it likes that. My division ID. Oh, so we do class. Okay. So in this case, we need to do this. Here we go. So here we used the element ID. So this is signified by the pound sign. So this style will apply to this element only on this page, because each page may have only one ID, one element with the same ID. We cannot have another element with the same ID. However, you can have multiple elements implementing the same class, as many as you want. So, so the other option to do this, we can use class and use background layer, for example. And let's see what happens. Now we have the same yep, my division class. So here we have two declarations for the same element. One is by ID and one is by style. So by ID takes precedence. If we change this name so it's not applicable to that element anymore, then the second one is applied. Here we go. So we have 100% 255 level red, 0 green, and 100% 255 blue, purple. So you need to make sure that you specify correctly. This signifies class, this signifies ID, and when they conflict, when you have different attribute set using ID and class and style, then ID has precedence. Now, this is not the only way to. Now, this one, just to make sure that you followed, this one has been renamed. This element does not exist. So it's not applicable. It does not work. It does not exist as far as HTML is concerned. So here we can apply different numerous attributes. For example, we can say, first we can set color in a little bit different way. So we can do RGB, which specifies color model schema, and then do level of red, level of green, and level of blue. And this is exactly the same That should be the same thing. Right, you cannot have space here. So there is another way to specify the same, because there are other color schemas that can be used. It's just probably not very practical, because the more colors you have, the greater the file size is, and it takes longer to load it. RGB seems to be perfectly sufficient for virtually all applications. Next, we may want to set up location layout. So let's say first width 50%. So let's see what happens. Here is width 50% of the window. We can have height specified the same way. Oops. Is it spelled correctly? Seems like it is. Okay, let's see. Okay, so it doesn't want a percentage here, but it can take pixels. Now, do not ever use pixels to specify the size of an element. It's very device specific. Something that looks good on a big screen will not display at all on a handheld device like a smartphone. You can, however, use EM. So what EM is, ultimately it's also percentage, but one EM signifies a standard font size height for this system, for the system where the page is displayed. Like here it is. So this is standard font size. So you can, so it's proportionate. So if you're displaying on a smaller screen, it's smaller. If on a larger screen, it's larger, and it's certainly, definitely preferred option over pixels. Do not ever use pixels. Bad practice. So in this exercise, we set background color to every single body within your domain that has this statement. So this main CSS is available to that HTML file, and it has body element. In that case, the body background will be universal, uniform between all pages in your domain. Okay, next we may want to change location of our division. So let's say set top 20%. So it should move our division. For some reason it doesn't want to deal with percents. It should. Oh, I'm already tired today, so we need to break. So let me just do this real quick, and then we'll finish this session and start. So we need to specify position type first. So in our case, we have position absolute, meaning that it's relative to the browser window. If we specify it relative, then it will be relative to the parent element, and in this case, parent element is body. So we have position absolute, and it moved. So this height is only part of the division. If we do 10. Here we go. So the division height changes and the entire background color is background is applied. This color is applied to it. So this is position. We can do left. Here we go. Um, so the idea is that using CSS, it's a very powerful tool. You can set any layout. You can specify layers. For example, one can be above the other. One element can be above the other. There's a Z index, right? So you set 2, because by default it's 1. So you set it 2, so another division finds itself covered partially or totally depending on their mutual locations. So this probably should conclude our today's session. Everybody's tired and we learned a lot today. Now you can practice, you can play with this. It requires some just getting used to. It's not programming, there is no logic involved other than understanding tags. So you don't really don't need to be a mathematician in order to apply skills that you have acquired today. Thank you and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.